Hi, this is Yulia, and here we are again. Welcome to All the Rebels and Revolutionaries. The last 3 episodes were devoted to the Iranian revolutions. Today, we transport ourselves to the beautiful island of Cuba. It's hard to imagine a channel dedicated to revolutionaries while ignoring the most charismatic of them all, Fidel Castro. In the next 2 episodes, I will focus on the unique nature of the Cuban Revolution and attempt to track the changes in Cuban society as this revolution progressed and aged. Did Fidel Castro succeed? Was he a good guy or not so much? These are simple questions that we have no simple answers to. One thing's for sure, this is indeed one of the most fascinating revolutions I studied. I apologize in advance if my story touches a personal note for some of my listeners. Let's do some fun background first to set the stage. Spain occupied Cuba from 1492 all the way up until 1899. Cuba fought several wars against Spain for independence. The third war involved the US and is known as the Spanish-American War. The US has been heavily involved in Cuba's affairs ever since it took the island from Spain in 1899. And that is when my favorite US president, then Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Teddy Roosevelt, shined, leading his Rough Riders. But that is another story. While corruption was a massive feature of the Cuban life even before the US effectively took control of the island, it did not get better after the takeover. Additionally, since its formal independence from the US on May 20th of 1902, Cuba went through a period of crazy political instability, revolts, coups, and all sorts of chaos. This chain of revolutions and anti-revolutions brings us to our first antagonist, a former soldier, who became the president of Cuba from 1940 to 1944, Fulgencio Batista. Even though he is universally known as a bad guy, he was actually very progressive during his first term. By 1952, he realized that he wanted to be president again, and instead of wasting time on the electoral process, he decided to seize power. Batista gave even more control to US companies, who happily took advantage of his generosity. He also had some sketchy links to organized crime. In the months following the 1952 coup, a young lawyer by the name of Fidel Castro called for the overthrow of Batista's regime. Since few were ready to follow his call, he decided to try a daring and rather hopeless revolutionary act that we now know as the Moncada Barracks attack. Even though this episode is not intended as a biography of Fidel Castro, I think that some sketches of his early life are needed in order to get a more complete picture of this revolutionary giant. Fidel Alejandro Castro Ruz was born on August 13th of 1926 at his father's farm. Castro attended the La Salle boarding school in Santiago, where he regularly misbehaved. He was then sent to a privately funded, Jesuit-run Dolores school in Santiago. In 1945, he began studying law at the University of Havana, becoming a left-leaning activist at a very early age. Fidel studied history, concluding, not incorrectly, that Cuba had been effectively colonized by the US, and attributed nearly all social problems, including the ongoing string of corrupt governments, to the omnipresence of the US political and business establishments. Despite his intense dislike for the US, or maybe exactly because of it, Fidel chose to spend his honeymoon in New York City. On October 12, 1948, he married a fellow student at the University of Havana, Mirta Díaz-Balart, a daughter of a prominent Cuban politician. With his father's money, Fidel bought a white Lincoln Continental and rented an apartment in the Bronx. In general, I found that throughout his childhood and youth, Fidel was never in a desperate need to earn his living, nor was he a stranger to material pleasures. Both of these facts are difficult to reconcile with the later image of Fidel as a self-depriving servant of the people. That was especially well established outside of Cuba, thanks mainly to Soviet propaganda. I also found his marriage to Mirta somewhat curious, as Fidel, in his revolutionary zeal, was bashing and insulting the members of the political establishment that Mirta's father was a part of, while accepting lavish wedding gifts from the same group of politicians. Predictably, this marriage did not last, and in 1955 the couple divorced. Upon their return from the honeymoon, Fidel set up a small law practice. He campaigned for a congressional seat and had a good chance to win. But on March 10th of 1952, Fulgencio Batista led a military coup, destroying Castro's political career. Fidel was understandably angry, and so were many other Cubans. Batista's regime was increasingly ruling with a heavy hand. Fidel's next step seemed to be motivated as much by his personal situation, no job, marriage on the rocks, no money, and no political prospects, as it was by the higher ideals that were later promoted as his motivation. He decided to ignite an insurrection by attacking the Moncada army barracks in Santiago de Cuba. While I realize and respect the almost spiritual significance of this day for many people in Cuba and outside of it, I must say that from purely a political and military perspective, it was an ill-conceived and almost suicidal plan. On July 26, 1953, Fidel risked the lives of 129 boys and 2 girls, leading them against 400 regular troops. Predictably, it was a massacre, with many killed on the spot or executed later. Fidel's life was miraculously spared, allegedly through the interventions of a Catholic bishop. This fact is shrouded in mystery and begs the question, did Fidel expect or hope for a bit of preferential treatment in the event of a failure, knowing that if he was protected, this attack would make him a hero practically overnight? In my next episode, I will continue to analyze the story of this fascinating revolution and the path of the regime that took power. Please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and join us next time on Rebels and Revolutions.